for Turd podcast, episode 133. Lamar, we have a really cool guest with us, sir.
Scott Bryan Wilson. We are going to be talking to this man, a writer of comics. And we're going to be talking about his new comic book, True Cult. Sir, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, man, and congrats on 133 episodes. That's fucking no joke.
Thank you.
Boy, oh boy, it took us some time, and boy, oh boy, mistakes and everything like that. So, yeah. So, but we got to start off with your comic book, True Cult. Tell us about it, because we've seen it, and it seems like it's about this guy who, like a lot of people who do not like working at a fast food restaurant, but then has resorted to robbing people, and things have started to go wrong. Like, what's the inspiration behind this?
Yeah, so the book is out actually. First issue comes out August 10th from IDW Originals. It's about a guy who works in fast food, and he, is a little tired of his dead end life, and he concocts a heist, which he managed to pull off. But the problem is he accidentally steals a weapon from a group of Satanists by accident, and sort of sets in motion a bunch of bad shit to come after that.
Now, I was wondering about, just out of curiosity, the spelling. It's pronounced True Cult, but it's spelled differently. Is there a meaning behind this?
The black metal spelling, taking the piss, showing who's more true than whom. And it didn't really, to me, it didn't, because it's spelled TRVE KVLT, right? Which to me, I was like, oh, that makes sense. I know what that says. But it's like hilariously caused a lot of problems when we've gotten some reviews and things, like video reviews, and people try to pronounce it phonetically, and it's a fucking disaster. So so we put a little thing in, like, the press releases and stuff that show how to pronounce it. But I wanted to go with a weird spelling. I thought it was, there's a satanic element to the book, so I thought the metal spelling would probably be the way to go.
Yeah. There you go. And then because that's pretty specific. Like, where did the idea come from? Because it seems like very inspired.
I always like crime. I always like crime fiction, crime movies, crime comics, true crime, crime podcasts, like anything, and so a lot of what I do is in the sort of crime sphere. I also, I like fucking comedy and horror and weird shit too. And I really wanted to do a heist book, and the artist on the book, her name is Liana Kangas. We were trying to find a project to do together, and she mentioned that, she always wanted to do like an Ocean's 11 style heist book. And that's sort of where it came from. I wanted to do something that was different from other heist movies, where a lot of the times the heist is super elaborate and it's a big part of the movie, and everything has to go right for it to work, right? And this one, I was just, what's a heist that a normal person could pull off, right? Like, setting aside that, a lot of shit would still have to go right, but so what's a heist that a normal person could pull off? So that's what I set forth to do. So the heist actually happens right in the opening pages. He clocks out and goes across the street to the strip mall, and he robs every store in a strip mall and comes and clocks back into work, right? And that sets off all the chain of events to follow. And in high school, like a lot of people, I did some, I worked in fast food too. And it made a big impression on me while I was there, just thinking, like, fucking remember all this. This shit is fucking weird. Remember this. You can do something with it someday. Like, I didn't think I was gonna be a writer or anything then. That wasn't what I was thinking about. But something in me said, you got to remember all this, because this is gonna be, this is gonna be something. So I had always just kind of packed away a lot of these weird stories and all that, and I put all that into sort of the universe of building the fast food restaurant and all the coworkers in this book.
Well, we're glad you got out of fast food and became a comic book writer. You just talk about your journey as a comic book writer over the years, how you got all these amazing projects and stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, I went to school for writing. When I got out of school, and I always loved comics. I got out of school, I got a job at DC Comics, and I ended up working there for 11 years. The thing is, you weren't allowed to write comics, not only for DC, but not for anybody else. right? When you work there. So that was never, I never thought about it because it wasn't a possibility for me, So I was writing a lot of short stories, a lot of horror short stories and prose and, working on some novels and things like that. And then when I decided to leave, my good friend who worked there, he said, so you can write for me now, right? And I was like, well, yeah, sure, of course, let's do it, So the key to break into comics is to spend 11 years working in comics, and then you can break in, right? But the funny thing is, right, like my first 2 jobs were writing a Batman, two Batman stories. I landed a few jobs based on that, but then phone didn't ring, and it was back to like, I was back to just like going to fucking Kinko's and making indie comics and just fucking plugging along, doing whatever I could, and these little jobs would come along every now and then. And, I realized that I was going to have to make work that I owned, rather than just trying to make my goal to write Spider-Man or something, right? As cool as that stuff is, right? You don't own it, so you don't have a stake in it. And this book, True Cult, is going to be my first. It's my first big create your own book, which is super exciting, And then I have another one coming too that hasn't been announced. I talked to a lot of younger writers who were like, "Hey, I want to write Hawkman or whatever," right? They want to, they want to write for DC, they want to write for Marvel, and they're like, "How do you do it?" And I'm like, "Don't try. Just don't give a fuck about them, right? Like, do something else, right? Like, if they want you, they'll come,
Yeah.
And I think like, in the end, it's like working for any fucking giant corporation, right? Like, they don't owe you anything. They don't fucking care about you, and they'll fucking spit you out when they're done with you, right? You can have a lot of fun while you're working there, and you can make some good friends, but like in the end, you're just at the whims of like some fucking corporation, The way to do it is to try to find a balance between always developing and working on your own shit and creating your own shit, and then trying to like get these work for hire things when they come around, or even just when they come around, just try to knock it out of the park and do some weird shit, and have fun with it.
How is it for like, let's say like branching out, or have you gotten to that point yet where it's like people have approached you like, hey, I want to do like, this with your property and stuff like that? Like, how have things changed over the years with comics?
Well, I'll say the big thing that's changed is streaming services. And they're desperate for content. Personally, I don't give a fuck if anything I make gets made into a movie, aside from the fact that gives me money to make more comics with, right? Like, I love comics. I just want to make comics. If it gets made into a movie and I get fucking paid and I can fucking make more, that's the goal. That's great, right? So streaming services have really opened a lot of doors in the sense that, they're looking for IP to turn into shows. And a comic book is a pilot episode, essentially, right? The first issue is a pilot episode. Much more so than a script that doesn't have any visuals to go with it, right? Because you can see, oh, this has this number of characters in it and this many locations, and so for like a book like True Cult, right, wouldn't be that expensive to make. It doesn't have a lot of locations. It doesn't have a ton of characters, right? So you can look at that and maybe that's attractive to people. I don't know. I mean, we have had people asking around about film rights and things like that, and you do get a new level of visibility, right, when you go through a bigger publisher. Whereas like with all my small stuff, never got any kind of interest like that. But then as soon as we got announced with IDW, people were starting, asking and seeing what's up. So
You have a heavy metal influence in the story, I guess. I noticed Lita Ford was mentioned a couple of times. Are you a Lita Ford fan, by the way, or just pick someone?
Nah, not so much. But the main character in the book is this old metalhead, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of references. There's like Queensryche, Lita Ford, Wingers in the first issue. Later issues, he's talking about Crimson Glory. Like, there's a lot of, he has a lot of like, references to different things. The thought is that he's just this guy who does this job, and he goes home and he listens to his fucking Lita Ford records, and like, to me, I just thought that was fun, and like, there's a place in my heart for all that music, and it seemed to really fit with the vibe of the story and the look of the character. He's got kind of a mullet and a mustache. It just seemed to really fit, So
Yeah, it would be a great to adapt this into a series or a movie. I was actually thinking like movies like The Gate or something that had some of that like influence of heavy metal and the cult
Mhm.
stuff. So yeah, that'd be awesome. Like to make True Cult into a film and that get some 80s rock stars up in there and stuff for some
Yeah,
cameos.
we never say when the book takes place. We intentionally kept that vague. There's mention of cell phones, but nobody's like using their smartphone every 2 seconds to look things up. We intentionally like kept all that kind of vague. It feels 80s, even though it's not. Right?
Right.
There's a lot of talk in there of things from the 80s and things like that, without being like a nostalgia fest or something. Or just
Right.
throwing stuff in to throw it in.
Yeah, I could totally picture like Dee Snider as like working at the place or something, like I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you think the 80s aesthetic has gone like done too much? Because like I kind of know about the 80s, but the thing is like even when I'm watching Stranger Things, I'm kind of like, we kind of get it. And then it's like you watch everything else and it has like an 80s vibe. Do you think it's gone too far with the 80s?
I mean, I lived through the 80s, so when I see 80s nostalgia stuff, I'm like, yeah, you kind of got it. It's a lot shittier than that, right?
Yeah,
like
it was strange enough, eh?
yeah, right. Like it wasn't that fucking, it wasn't that fucking cool, there was a lot of cool stuff, but it was definitely not like, I don't know. I think if it's done, anything that's done well, can be, it survives on its own merits.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is the future of like just comic books in general, and then in particular with what you want to do with your comic book writing?
Creator-owned books are bigger than ever, right? And a lot of that is because of these media tie-ins, and this potential to be made into movies. Because frankly, look, let's face it, most people don't read fucking comics, but most people do watch TV, right? Mm-hmm. So like, and a lot of the biggest names in comics recently have sort of left Marvel and DC to strictly go do their own comics, to do stuff, create their own things, right? And they can get paid and leave some money on the table to do that, right? But they believe in themselves and they believe in what they're doing and they believe in the possibility of making a living on things they own rather than things they don't own, And I really think that's the way it's going,
For your career, what were the comic books, writers, artists that inspired you to get into comic books? Like what inspired you to really take that, jump into the actual, art itself?
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid in the 80s, comics weren't like they are now, right? Comics came out on a monthly, and then that was it, right? They weren't collected into hardcovers and paperbacks to live on forever, right? And if you missed an issue, you had to fucking go find it. It was sometimes kind of a fucking headache to dig it up or whatever. But a few things were in paperback, and the Watchmen, Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, and Ronin, which is a Frank Miller book, this sci-fi Japanese samurai thing. And I just read those constantly until I saved up enough and I finally bought my own copies, So those were the really sort of formative books when I was a kid. And then I read comics growing up and I mostly read superhero stuff. But as I got older and my taste became more varied and I got more interested and I realized like there's a lot of really cool shit. It's not, Superman. There's a series by Scott Bryan Wilson and an artist named Eduardo Risso called 100 Bullets. Just fucking outstanding. From Hell by Alan Moore is probably my favorite comic ever. Towering masterpiece. Can go toe to toe with any other literary work ever, I think, in my book. Lately, by the last few years, I've actually started reading a lot more manga. Because that's something that I didn't have other than Akira, which is a massive influence on me. I read that as a kid. Marvel published it in colorized versions in the late 80s, early 90s. I read those as a kid, but there's a lot of just fucking killer manga out there. I mean, there's a lot of fucking trash too, but that's just the way it goes with everything.
We're looking forward to True Cult, which is coming out once again in August. Before we let you go, where can everyone just connect with you and all?
Yeah, I mean, my site, scottbryanwilson.com, Brian with a Y. Yeah, it has a list of like everything I have out or coming out. I'm on Twitter, Scott BR Wilson, because otherwise it's too fucking long and Twitter don't allow it. And I'm on Instagram as Scott Bryan Wilson.
Awesome, man. Well, we thank you for being on with us, and True
Thank
Cult
you for your time.
out in
Fellas,
August.
thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Peace.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Later.